Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. One of the fights on the card from Riyadh, the last crescendo card, that I think got overlooked by a lot of people simply because it was on so early. It was actually the first one in the main card. So it started about 5:30 UK time, and that was between Callum Smith and Joshua Buatsi. And this was a fantastic fight. It really was a terrific fight. Good old-fashioned British dust-up. Smith came in, 30 wins, 2 defeats. The only times he'd been beaten were to Artur Beterbiev in January of 2024, so just over a year ago. And he also lost down at super middleweight when he lost to Canelo Alvarez in 2020. That was a unanimous decision. He barely won a round against Canelo. It was pretty much it looked like a non-effort, really. And prior to that, he lost a very, very questionable decision, he won a very, very questionable decision against John Ryder. I thought Ryder won that fight relatively clearly, 116, 112 maybe. So at 168, he probably stayed there for too long. He looked a bit dead at the weight. And then he moved up to light heavyweight after a break, probably about a 10-month break. He made his debut at 175 in 2021, but he didn't really do a great deal. I mean, there was a lot of inactivity. He had one fight in 2021, one fight in 2022, and he did look good at the new poundage. Then he didn't fight at all in 2023, and then he fought Artur Beterbiev, having been out for, 16 months or so, something like that. And Beterbiev predictably smashed him up in 7 rounds. I mean, jumped all over him from the word go and just beat Callum up. Callum had no reply. Then he had one little 5-round KO of a journeyman late last year, November last year. And then they matched him with Joshua Buatsi. And, Callum is now 34. And even though he has, won title, he's won titles at super middleweight. He won the World Boxing Super Series. He's been Ring Magazine champ. You still get the feeling, do you know what? He's kind of underachieved a bit. Because I remember Callum, when he started out, I thought this guy's good, really, really good. And he was absolutely enormous at super middleweight. Like I say, he stayed there for too long, but at 175, he don't look like there's an ounce of fat on him. He really doesn't. And this fight with Joshua Buatsi, this was really an absolute crossroads fight for him, because at 34, had he lost, you got to say, well, where's he going? Is that the end for him, at least at world level? Now, Buatsi is 3 years younger at 31, and he's another one that you could say has kind of underachieved. He was a medalist at the Olympics. He turned pro in 2017. He was with Matchroom. He promised an awful lot. They were thinking he's a surefire world champ. And he looked very, very impressive for the first half of his career. Then he kind of stuttered a bit. And he was beating up people like a washed up Marco Antonio Periban. He stopped him in 4 rounds. He was fighting people like, Ryan Ford, who's kind of like a B- fighter, stopped him in 7. Ricards Bolotniks, that was in 2021, that victory. And Bolotniks, despite having a bit of a patchy record, is a pretty good European level fighter. And Buatsi knocked him out in 11 rounds. That was actually a good performance, because Bolotniks was coming off some good wins. Then he beat Craig Richards in 2022. That's a good win. That's a unanimous decision. And, Dan Aziz, that was last year. And then Willie Hutchinson on a split decision, which should have, in my opinion, been unanimous. I don't know what the judges were watching, because if that wasn't a unanimous decision, I don't know what is. That was a good win. That was a good win. And he was meant to fight. The Willie Hutchinson fight, by the way, was at Wembley Stadium last year on the undercard of, was it Dubois versus Joshua? September last year. Now, that was meant to be Buatsi's coming out party against Anthony Yard. But Yard got into some sort of spat with Frank Warren, pulled out. was supposedly keeping his options open. He's now gone back to Frank Warren, apparently so. But there was talk of litigation, as is Frank Warren's bent. But yeah, that would have been a really good win if he'd beaten Yard. But instead, he had Willie Hutchinson, who was coming off a very good victory over Spider Richards. So he was kind of expected to beat Callum Smith. He's undefeated in 19. He's got 13 KOs, very sharp puncher, kind of an upright guy. But at 31, you're thinking perhaps he could have achieved a lot more. I think he was actually offered a fight with, was it Dmitry Bivol, which he turned down. Now, Buatsi has been trained for quite a while now by Virgil Hunter. And I always thought that was quite a sort of odd pairing because, come on, one of both ways, because Buatsi is, even though he's quite a softly spoken guy, he's quite hot-headed. He's got a temper on him and he's got a bit of spite to him. And Virgil Hunter is a very relaxed, almost a serene type of guy. You could sort of fall asleep listening to him, not because he's necessarily boring, he's just got this very soft lilt to his voice. And that can work one of two ways. It can mean that they're incompatible, or it can mean that they strike a balance. But I do think, I always wondered, is that really the right trainer for Buatsi? I mean, he's had success, but I get the feeling that Buatsi might be sort of reined in a little bit too much by someone like Hunter. He might have the sort of fire that pumps him up, motivates him, diminished a little bit by someone who is so softly spoken and cerebral and, doesn't really fight on, or doesn't really operate on nervous energy the way that Buatsi seems to. Because there is a cold-bloodedness about Buatsi when he's at his absolute best. And I thought, okay, Callum Smith, good opponent, good domestic opponent. Let's see what you're made of. Let's see if you can really do a number on Smith. If it's a few rounds earlier than Beterbiev, that's, a little promotional hook, a little bit of hype that you can hang on to. But in actual fact, Smith was the one who looked like his career had been reborn. I'm struggling to think of a better Callum Smith performance. I thought he was brilliant in that fight, absolutely brilliant, against, a highly motivated and dangerous Buatsi. It's not as if Buatsi really did anything particularly bad. I mean, I've always thought he's a bit upright. I've always thought he can be hit. His defence can be a little bit sloppy. He tends to stand a bit square on. Hits very hard. Nice threading of the punches. Very good technique. But does have little lulls in the rounds where the other guy is allowed to work. And I think Smith and Buddy McGirt, who trains Callum Smith, had their tactics down pat, which is that, we're going to bang this guy to the body. We're going to outwork him. He can be quite conservative. We're going to contain him. We're going to use that desire to be too precise against him. And Callum Smith, I mean, the fifth round, he really had Buatsi on what they call Queer Street, the old American phrase, which I always loved. He was looking like he was sagging quite badly. And fair play to Buatsi, he hung tough. He came back. He cut Smith. I think Smith had some damage, and then I think he had the cut opened badly, I think, in the last round. But in other words, he made Smith work, even though Smith, I thought, was almost something of a revelation, like reborn again, you might say. And Smith has said, he said before the fight, it did sort of cross my mind to do, is it worth carrying on? Am I going to get the opportunities? But I need something to motivate me. I've been a world champ at the lower weight. I've won tournaments. I've been Ring Magazine champ. I need someone to really pump me up, something to get up for. And clearly, Joshua Buatsi, undefeated, highly ranked. This was for the WBO interim title, so that gets you the inside track to the full fat belt, which, of course, as we know, is held at the moment by Dmitry Bivol. This was a really impressive performance by Smith against a very, very good opponent. Both these guys fought really quite brilliantly, I thought. And if you haven't seen this fight, go and have a look at it. It's an absolutely brilliant fight. Now, a lot of people have said, okay, how about Smith now taking on Bivol? Or maybe Buatsi can go and finally fight Yard. I mean, they've both got a bit of a, well, but Buatsi's 31, but if he needs any inspiration to carry on, you've got to look at Callum Smith, who's 34 and was sort of half written off by a lot of people, and he's suddenly back in the saddle. But a lot of people have said, will Smith get a chance at Bivol? Probably not, because Bivol and Beterbiev are probably going to have a decider, a third fight, and I've got no problem with that. I mean, they talk about the belts being tied up, but those first two fights were so brilliant. And the technique with Bivol and Beterbiev is so dazzling, despite having very contrasting styles. I'm quite prepared to watch a third fight there. What I'd like to see is Callum Smith go in there with Gilberto Ramirez. And I tell you what, on the evidence of what we saw against Buatsi, I wouldn't rule out Smith, because Smith carries that 175 poundage very, very well, and showed, again, I know the word I would use is revelation. He showed such a brilliant variety of punches against Buatsi, especially to the body. And I absolutely, if you watched my channel before, I absolutely love the body work, which is still sinfully neglected by a lot of fighters. I think Callum Smith can give Gilberto Ramirez all he needs to, because even though he's 34, he looked more like 26 in that ring, like he was just entering his prime, not past it. And Gilberto, good fighter. That win over David Morrell was very, very good win. But I would love to see Callum Smith fight Gilberto Ramirez. Bivol and Beterbiev can have their decider, and then the two winners come together. I think that would be a good way of doing it. For Buatsi, a little bit of rebuilding to do. Like I say, Yard's back in with Queensbury. Buatsi's Sky. Ben Shalom's his promoter. Shalom and Frank Warren can't stand each other. Frank Warren certainly can't stand Ben Shalom. I'm sure that fight can be made. That would be a good one. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts about this, because I thought, it's fantastic to see Callum Smith back. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to Joshua Buatsi, who was terrific. He didn't do anything wrong. He was just beaten by a better guy on the night. But let me know what you think. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to see what I said, Smith against Gilberto. Don't write Smith off. But let me know what you think. Comments below. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the like button. Do all that good stuff. Spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. Let's build up the numbers, build up the views. It's our channel, not just mine. Come on, let's promote it. Let's do a lot of... Maybe I should hit someone with an egg. How about that? It's just to get the channel promoted. I go around hitting people. Where's Gareth A. Davies when you need him? Eh? Anyway, enough of that. Comments below. Looking forward to reading them. And bye for now.